Welcome, welcome.
Well, I took a chair, but the guy took it away. That was more comfortable, but never mind. Yeah.
Relax.
We'll survive.
It's quite sweaty. The back of this chair is quite sweaty, but you get used to it, after a while. Welcome, guys. First of all, I'd just like to say that originally this panel is part of the CRO-AI team, who also gave us some stuff for our gift bag. If you got our gift bag, check CRO-AI out in there. And Leia Zelić, unfortunately, she couldn't be with us tonight. So now you have me again. Sorry, guys, to lead this panel. Basically, we're going to be talking about how you scaled your AI startups, right? Going from the first stage, moving through 4 stages, and seeing where you are today and what the future holds, okay? So let's begin a little bit. Tell us, what is Hyperfy in 20 seconds?
Hyperfy is an AI agent that enables brands to run entire influencer marketing campaigns, start to end, with one prompt.
Boom. That, my friends, is a short pitch. Good. And Splix AI?
SPLX AI.
Okay, SPLX AI, sorry.
Security platform with X Factor, so we do basically secure those LLMs and agents offensively and defensively. So penetration testing, security testing for AI.
Excellent, thanks. And thanks for actually, because a lot of people over the last few days have been saying Splix AI. I think because we want it to sound like Split.
It's so Splix, first of all, because of Split.
Yeah.
And second, because it's a security platform with X Factor. So
there we go. There we go. Nice. Thanks for explaining. Okay. So obviously it all starts with an idea and then it moves to MVP. So tell us how you moved from that idea to MVP to today and compare the beginning with where you are now. We'll start with Hyperfy.
Okay, well, I think Chris and I are going to differ in opinion here. And I actually, I'm in Zadar in 2 weeks or so. And I have a keynote there that's called Sell, Build.
Okay.
Yeah.
How many cells?
I don't know. It's a random number between 6 and 8, I guess. Anyway, how we started is, I mean, spaces are different, but how we started is we started selling without anything. We just had an algorithm in the back end. We didn't have a platform. We didn't have basically anything front facing. We just started selling to customers and started talking to them and finding out what the hell they want. Because if you don't ask the market what it wants, it's tough to find out. And you hear it, you build it, you hear it, you build it, you hear it, you say it's bullshit, I'm not going to build this. But you keep selling until you then have an MVP that you actually know works for a market.
Okay. Do you disagree?
No, I love that actually. And you should be from Israel, not from Croatia. No, I love that. But I think scaling a company from Croatia, it's not possible to do that. Depending which business you are, but when we started, we were basically clear we want to do security for AI. It was a huge topic back then, and it's now even growing, but we felt all those LLMs and all those chatbots, they need to be secured. And they're not going to do only chatbots, it's going to be document upload, image upload, it's going to be voice bots now, the new E-Class from Mercedes-Benz, so it's a voice bot. You say your voice, basically you say something, open the car, it opens the car, no, it's you, so you can do jailbreaks, whatever, in the back. And we saw we need to secure it either from the offensive way or the defensive way. So that's why we narrowed down the product already. But I believe that everyone wants to see a demo. Everyone says, hey, show me. Let's do a POC. Let's do and our way was hard. I mean, my co-founder was last year keynote speaker in the evening. And I think what's really core about Croatia is like product first. When you want to sell the company, when you scale the company, it's a product first led sales in the beginning, right? You can do all the sales stuff, and I have this background as well, and right. But you want to create trust, and you want to create bounding stuff, like with people who actually see the product. And our investors currently tell us, when we come speak to people, they say, show the product, right? So and the product has evolved with the feedback of the customers, actually with time, and that's why also coming back to your point. We have the head start against our competitors. Our competitors are mostly Israel, US firms who have an idea and do some services around penetration testing of AI and saying they're going to secure AI. Hey, I'm going to take your chatbot 2 weeks or model, I'm going to secure it. With SPLX, it's like plug and play. One click API integration, run the test, and you're going to see what's happening. And that's the head start. If we haven't done that, we would be at another startup just selling and try to do our best. But again, Croatia is not sexy yet. Not 100% sexy, right? We want to be sexy, but you can't compare with other markets. So you need to build first a number one product.
Okay. What's interesting there is like you made the joke about the mindsets, right? More of an Israeli mindset than a Croatian mindset. And one of the things we often get here is negative feedback from people. We say, we're going to do this. And people are like we said a minute ago, ne može or something. And you touched on this. So how do you feel with, how do you deal with negative feedback?
I think you have to have like I wouldn't call it a talent. It's like a flaw that you ignore all the negative feedback, and it's actually much easier to get negative feedback from potential customers because if you build something good, if you know how to sell, you're gonna get a lot of yeses. So that's kind of like it's okay, it's survivable, but getting negative feedback from a bunch of investors, that's one of the mistakes that I see founders do often. Like they speak to 8, 10, 20 funds and they get no's and they give up, like my idea is not good enough because they got so many no's. But what happened in our seed round, we reached out in total to around 300 funds. We got invested in by 3, one of them by a USA billionaire, Thomas Petterfy, and that's a 1% success rate, right? The difference for us was between the 0% success rate and 1%, and that was huge, right? So I'm the bad optimist. I always say that my co-founders hate me because I always say, "Oh, it's gonna be good. Don't worry about it. We're gonna take care of it." They're always panicking. But I think that's something that makes you persevere, that makes you stay, that makes you push, that makes you sell. And frankly, pardon my French, but not give a shit about if anybody says no.
It's fine. Swearing's been happening all over this stage so far tonight. It's never a problem, Croatian or English. So talking about that, so he said ignore all negative feedback. Is that the same?
Depends negative feedback on what. We touch based on investors. I think we never reach out to any investor, as far as I know. We disagree in this. We had the discussion before here up there, and I think it's with everything in life. It's like in Split. Everyone knows everyone. You know, people need to talk about you. If people don't talk about you, why would they reach out to someone? Doesn't make sense. Build a good product, work with good people, have a good CV, come from somewhere, do something, and people will talk about you. People reach out to you. When we got the first term sheet, I think almost 2 years ago, it all became like massive, you know. People from Poland came here. We have English investors coming on Monday here to Split. We have American investors coming here from Silicon Valley. We always tell them, come to Split. If you want to meet me, come to Split, you know. So I think you should do something that creates the FOMO. I know you will ask me on the recipe, but definitely it's not based on negativity, right? Negativity is like, hey, can we really sell this company? Can we really scale this company? And are we really having the right English? Are we having the right wording? You know what I mean? But still, I mean, we have this mentality, you know, I always say from Dalmatia, I mean, I can do anything. I'm not scared. The most important thing is if you can go out there and you're not scared, you're going to do anything. Let's see what happens, right? I think that's not negativity.
Cool. I have a comment on this CV part, and I fully agree with you. It's super cool to have shining CV, having people talk about you. But there's a bunch of students here, right? Especially tonight with us. I heard a student group.
Make some noise if you're a student. Make some noise. Oh my God.
That's weak noise. Come on.
We're in Velvet on a Friday night. Make some noise. There we go, a little bit better.
I cut you off because my co-founder didn't really have the strongest CV in terms of hype. You know, I used to work for Silicon Valley-based companies. I used to live abroad. Fine. But he was smart enough to say, why? I'm a great engineer. I have an idea. And I'm going to find the right guy who can do the company with me. Look how smart he was. Mm-hmm. Other people would say, you know what? I have the idea. I'm going to do it myself. I'm going to do it with my, I don't know, brother, whatever. My brother's here, and we were supposed to do a startup ourselves. But when I met Ante, I immediately knew something is happening here. This guy is weird professor, type of engineer guy, awkward guy. We're totally different. This is the recipe for me, for any future startup I will build. I cannot do the tech, right? But I need to find people who know it. So if you don't have a CV, you can find someone who has it. You will have much easier way.
Nice. Can you just tell us a little bit, like, you know, we talked about idea MVP today. When did this all start for SPLX-AI?
2.5 years ago. Cool. So, I mean, we told the story last year. So I came to Croatia back in COVID. Well, my family and stuff like spent some time here and basically started to live here. And I met Ante's brother-in-law on a plane. And I told him he's a front-end engineer. And I told him like, hey, if you want to build a startup, give me a call, right? And 2 years later, he gave me the call. He said, I have someone you want to meet, and the rest is history, right? So I also know Tony, long time, Trivkovic. We were talking about building something in Split, but I never felt finding someone with the right energy, which fits me. I'm not an easy person to work with. So I want to find someone who will push me when I'm going down, you know? And we started iterating on the European market, and we immediately saw there is no European market for security. We need to go to the US, and the rest is history. I mean, so meanwhile, we have 30 people. We have 25 people in Croatia, 5 people in the US, scaling. We did 1.1 million ARR in just 3 quarters. And we work with Uber, Rakuten, KPMG, Deloitte, AT&T, Verizon.
Nice.
Fully enterprise sales motion.
Perfect, cool. And Hyperfire, when did it all begin, the idea?
It was about 4 years ago, a bit less than 4 years ago. We had a bit of a different path. The three co-founders, me and my 2 co-founders, were college friends. No CVs, no living abroad, nothing. We just had an idea and we wanted to push it. That's why our path was a bit different. But yeah, we had an exciting journey. These almost 4 years now. We're prepping for Series A, and I can't disclose amounts and terms because we haven't started yet. But we were like friends with a vision, and we cover each other well, and we just pushed, didn't say no. And what you mentioned, you're a difficult person to work with. I think all founders are in some way difficult to work with, and I get the same feeling from the people that work at Hyperfire. There's 25 of us now, 24 to be precise. It's like I have a sort of an energy that's hard to cope with, and I annoy people all the time. But if you cover each other's bases right, if you work together well, then you can use these strengths and let's say hide the flaws. Like so I was the sales guy, right? I was the one selling and getting no's. This guy, that's in tech, that's the CTO, never got a no.
This is maybe biggest. Message today is will can kill the skill, you know. Like I have a call later at 11 p.m. with my co-founder, with another West Coast VC, whatever. We're gonna take a call anyways. Like you need to be there. Anything, forget about everything. You just need to show up. When you show up and repeat, and you have a decent product, you're gonna make it. You're gonna learn. I think we came out of nothing. We came to the US. Like I haven't sold before to US market, but we learned it the hard way. Understand, having jokes with people, understanding what the guy said before here on the VC, like, hey, great energy, passion, you know. Way easier to sell in the US, to make friends in the US, because people love the technology and people love when you're passionate about it, right? So if my advice is, hey, you want to build a startup, you want to do something, go to the US first, immediately. I'm super annoyed that I spent like 10 years, 15 years staying in Germany or whatever, working somewhere, I don't know, in Dubai. Even the UK, much faster than the rest of the Europe, right? So if this is my advice, and I think it's great what you've done, what you have achieved, right? And with your passion, right? I'm just trying to explain it. Maybe you can do it easier, right? And what people have talent from this region here is like they learn fast, and they have this, you know, street mentality, street skills.
Well, the reason I asked you about the say timescale of working is whether there is a difference between quality over speed, and whether research and development is against fast shipping. You know, what's important, and we've touched on it a bit. And now with this hindsight, now you have sped ahead, and you are where you are now. Do you still, you know, it's a pretty fast timeline, right, compared to others? So do you believe that that's ever cost quality, or do you believe that actually it's still the right way to go?
Well, when you say quality, the first thing I think of is tech debt. When like I mentioned it earlier, like sell, then build. So and when we shipped features, we shipped them almost incomplete, like no tests, you know, no nothing. But I think tech debt is a resource to use. Like if I can, you know.
Can you just explain what is tech debt?
Yeah, it's like you don't do a feature the right way, but the quick way, and it's gonna bite you in the ass in a couple of months or a year. So you have to fix it later on, and you're gonna lose much more time when you're gonna fix it than if you had built it from the beginning.
Okay.
But my point is, if I ship a feature that's like not super high quality but works, and I can sell it immediately, it's much easier to fix it later on.
Okay.
That's why, like, I pushed for shipping features completely incomplete to pitch to funds that worked. I knew they were going to break sometime, but I managed to sell a bunch in the meantime, and that's the money and attraction that we managed to get along the way. Made it so much easier than to build quality on top of this.
Okay, but cybersecurity, slightly different build.
That's a great question. No, I think it's the same. I agree with him. Like the thing is, you need in the beginning, you're a founding team. You know all the people. You work together 24 hours. You build with high duration, high quality. When people later stage come, they're not the A players anymore. We used to call, right? They're B players, talented players, young, maybe students, whatever. You slow down in production. I learned that in software development. When you're 30 people, you slow down, right? When you're like less than 10 people, you're super fast, you iterate fast. That's why, again, I love the Israeli model. If you think about Israeli startups, there is no company, private company, which is longer than 30 years in the business in cybersecurity. Even Checkmarx was the biggest company. They have one pattern, which is building a company, Series A, Series B, sell it. Sell it to the big companies, sell it to the Googles, to the Amazons, whatever, to, I don't know, Palo Alto, because they just lose quality. And I think Croatia should see that as a position as well, like, hey, do super iterate fast, grow the revenue, make it sexy, sell it for 150, 200, and go to the next one. Like, then we can create a culture of startups, right? Because you will lose quality with 50, 40, 60 people. You're going to become a next Infobip. And I know that for sure, not the most quality people now going after so many years to a company which has 3,000 employees, right? This is one thing. Yeah.
Okay. And with iteration, like how do you know when? How can you? Is there a pattern? Do you know when to iterate? Because you both mentioned it a few times. You've mentioned about sell 8 times, I think it was, and the features that you add. So, how do you manage all of that?
From my perspective, it's like I'm a fireman, and we're all firemen. It sounds a bit weird to compare startup founders with firemen, but what we do basically, aside from building new things, is put out fires. Like I know that we have a bunch of fires going on in the company. I know that something's going to bite us in the ass, but we have small fires. We have huge, like Croatia has these huge fires, and when the wind that you mentioned blows, and what we basically do is focus on the biggest fire at a time, and it's a skill to recognize which is the biggest fire, right? That's under your ass. Okay. Is it sell in the UK, sell in the US first so you can raise money from the US? Is it build a quality product? It depends on the market, depends on the niche. But all we do is put out fires all the time, and that's the most fun life you can lead. I can tell you the excitement I feel every time the shit hits the fan. Like, we're gonna fix this, we're gonna break through this. And that's the fun part about being a founder. You feel the responsibility that you got to do it. Nobody else is going to take it from your hands. And if it fails, it's like everything fails. You owe the people from your company. You owe the quality, and you owe the fact that the company needs to survive. It needs to grow. Otherwise, you fail the people. So it's kind of like a balance between stress and having fun at the same time. That's why I recommend it to fucking everyone.
Yeah, it was a fine line, isn't it? Stress and excitement. So basically, you're firefighting and you're also iterating and adding features.
Yeah.
So you're creating more fires whilst fighting other fires.
Yes.
Is that the same in SPX AI?
I wouldn't say so.
No fires.
No. I mean, there are fires, but we're now professionalizing a lot of steps. I think we learned the hard way. From a few months ago, we had a burn of $250,000 per month. We increased the burn now to $400,000. So we're hiring A players with huge experience, and we need to give away responsibility to people, okay? So I learned that as a founder, you can't do everything because you're just growing as a business. You're doing the main stuff, the investment stuff and whatever. I think a lot of Croatian founders, I met a lot of companies also here in Split, they say, we need to look at the cost. It's a costly business. That's why you basically raise the money. And I think I learned the hard way. I can't keep the VC money for years. I need to burn it heavily. Yeah. Heavily burn. And then you can see, like, it's a game. It's like a gamble. You need to burn heavily, and you can't be on every fire. I think you need to give the people responsibility, throw them in the water, as my co-founder would say, and we'll see what happens. We hired now 3 salespeople in the US. Maybe 1 or 2 will survive. The rest will fire. So this is how it works. Easy.
Yeah. No, great. And you talked about the money, right? How did you get that money? How did you get your investors? Well, you said
revenue, FOMO, logos. I mean, how do you get? So first 2 million we got last year in June. Second 5 million we got this year, and we're just now closing Series A. So based on revenue, hard work, all the founders-led stuff. So until 2 million ARR, we're going to be founder-led sales. We're all like, how did you get there? We're all the time on site. So I have an apartment in New York, and I'm here part-time. And I'm all the time traveling. So any customer we closed, I met on site and shake hands and build champions. I can only encourage every founder, depends what you do. I know your business is different. But I think if you're building an enterprise software, B2B, you should meet people on site. You should spend time with them. They should understand you're trustful and you're not fucking around. Okay. And they will trust you with 100K, 50K, 30K, 150K. And this is how you grow. And then you do the FOMO. For example, one trick I learned also from another big Israeli founder. He told me do a how's it called, broadcast WhatsApp group. I told him, well, what's that? It's like when you, for example, close a deal, you send it in the broadcast group, and like 150 people gets it. Create a Splix.ai WhatsApp group of fans, so you share news.
Yeah.
The most important thing is FOMO on a startup. Like if you're in a sexy space and AI security is like crazy, we're seeing multiples of 300.
Okay.
Companies at 1 million are selling for 300 million because it's going to be essential. Why? Because you can't compare it with cloud security. AI security is going to be used by kids, by schools, by teenagers. The impact of AI and LLMs is already huge, right? Think about how businesses will react to that. So we are like in cloud security 2008. Everyone is jumping on it. Plus, these traditional companies like Palo Alto, they don't have the skills. They're buying the skills. Croatia has beautiful data scientist skills pool, and this is what they like. So I think creating the FOMO the right way, that everyone knows about you, is critical, and the right people should know about you.
Yeah. So you mentioned like being on site, creating these personal relationships in a way, right? Putting in the time, and then you create your community. You can create the FOMO, as you said. Great, I love the terms. But how did you get that first foot in the door when you were a no one?
I mean, hard to say. I think first closing customers and, for example, in Croatia, like working with Infobip and meeting the right people and getting the right inbound. I think first term sheet we got was from a Croatian, actually local VC, and then it spread across Europe. I think what I also learned from other founders is like, I as a CEO should be only getting term sheets all the day. That's my only job. And speaking to critical customers. I don't spend time on the tech anymore, long time. And on, I don't know, customer success, operations, I don't care. We'll fix it later. Only getting term sheets.
Okay. You obviously have a different story because you were saying about the 1% success rate. Were you literally just sending emails, calling, meeting? What were you doing to talk to all these VCs?
Well, I think spaces are a bit different, and enterprise sales is a bit different, and you can hit a niche on like a nail on the head. Like I think Kristian managed to hit a perfect niche, and it's amazing what he's building, and it's a Croatian company building, world bleeding edge tech from Split, right? You don't expect that to happen every day. We had a bit of a different path. It was a bit tougher. First, we didn't do enterprise sales. Second, we started with a space that's not as sexy, but it's beginning to be sexy now again. And we went on a path like I wanted to sell as much as I can and to build up revenues to prove my MVP that it works. And the story with the 1% success rate, we went out. We didn't. I think that's where we went wrong a bit. I actually like Kristian's creating FOMO. I didn't know how to do that in the beginning. I just knew how to get hype. That's why we're called Hypeify.
Hypeify.
Hype with customers, hype with potential employees. Which I then brought on, and we're growing like 4x year on year. So it's a good, tempo, but we didn't manage to build the same FOMO in the beginning. We didn't dabble too much in that. We were too excited about the product and about selling, and I think if we went that path, we might have been bigger now. But I still love my path.
Yeah. Well, we know why you're sexy, but why did that 1% find you sexy and the 99% didn't? What was it that you managed to finally click with them or reach out to them and they were like, let's go?
In the early stages, I think it's team.
Okay.
It's team. They have to see the excitement. They have to see you're a bit off the rails. You're a bit insane, right? A bit weird, I'd say. And I think Kristian mentioned that already when he met his co-founder, that he knew he was the right vibe. He was a bit weird, but that's the thing you want to find. Like you don't want everyday people. I don't want to show up talking all polite in a shirt. You need to be a bit crazy for the people in funds to recognize you're the one that's going to build this. You're the one that's going to push through it. And we were just ourselves because we are a little off the rails, all three of us.
Yeah. Well, I can't remember the exact words Paul used, but it was something like that. But I'd love to remember what he said because it was like, yeah, basically be fucking crazy, right?
Be fucking crazy, yeah. And I think Paul should be fucking crazy right now and call the Tonga Prime Minister if he has the phone number because it's 7:40 Tonga, yeah. It's 7:35 a.m. there. He could pick up the phone.
We could do it during Split Tech City Festival. Get Croatia recognized. Oh, there we go. He's got his phone up. There we go. There we go. Let's go.
If he responds, tell us so we can share it.
We can get him online.
I love that. There are so many stories me and my co-founder have, but one is like in the plane when we're flying to the US, they just split us because we're screaming. In Dalmatia, when you talk,
Yeah.
And they're like, go. Some, I don't know, Chinese guys came, no, I want to sleep, go away. Like, it's great. Like, you need to have the passion. And I think not only showing up, following up.
Okay.
Most underrated thing in business is following up. When I follow up with you 3-4 times, you will say a few times no. It's like, I don't know, dating. Maybe sometimes you will say yes. Trust me.
You're scaring me. You're looking me in the eyes and I want to say yes.
I will show up. I will show up and you will not expect. And this is exactly what we do.
I have a good example here. I have a friend here who's founder of Crumbs. You can get free food from Crumbs.
Yeah.
He sent me a screenshot of an email from a prospect that said, the mail went like this. Dear Antonio, after tens of tries from your side, we're finally ready for a conversation. And that's the follow-up strategy you should... I wouldn't follow up 20 times, but he's crazy enough. But I agree. Yeah, you have to follow up. You have to be persistent. If you give up after the first no, you're gonna just go home
to know
and
your
play
ICP.
video games.
So you need to know your ICP, ideal customer profile, and we know for example, we now work with Uber, digital companies. We want to work with Netflix, McDonald's. We want to work with those companies. They're gonna have a huge utilization of LLMs and agents, and I know exactly whom I want to go after. And sometimes, and then recently we had a call, and I said, finally, you gave me a call, right? You need to make people laugh, and they will not understand it as an aggressive thing, right? Sometimes it's overly aggressive. I think emailing doesn't make sense. We don't do any email campaign.
Okay.
No cold emails, zero. That doesn't work in cybersecurity. You need to be in the right hotel. You need to be in the Four Seasons in the lobby. You need to show up when the guy is sitting there. That's how you do it.
Okay.
This is our business totally different. So even cold calling doesn't make sense. Be at the right venues, be at the right events, let people talk about you, let people reach out to you in the ideal world, but also showing up in the lobby of the Four Seasons.
For us, it's cold, and showing up at the right places. And by the way, I just remember something. Smok said no to us.
Oh, good. Okay, one thing. So we know Dalmatians have passion, right?
Oh, yeah.
However, there seems to be this idea that passion is maybe placed in the wrong place, or it's not placed when it comes to believing they can create a global company. You guys are different. You're both Dalmatian, right? Yeah, cool. So what is missing here? Why do some companies not have that global mindset? Or founders?
I mean, I talked about it. Can I take it? Yeah, I talked about it this winter. What I love about Croatia and like Dalmatia is like when I'm coming back home from a long trip, I need 2 days or 1 day drinking a coffee, being at the sea, I'm chill again. I'm a normal person again. Like when I'm in the Silicon Valley all the time, like I feel like fucking crazy, Sometimes I need to slow down a bit. This is good for Croatia. The problem is the sales mentality. A lot of people don't want to be sold to. They feel like, hey, this is harassment, this is aggressive. They are not talking that way. They're just like talking very technical. If you look at our founding team, they're super, super technical. But sometimes our customers think we're Russians or they're Russians.
Yeah.
And I said, go, just try to explain it a better way. Try to articulate yourself, And sometimes you need to go abroad and see it. A lot of Croatians, I mean, we're talking about Bill Belichick, legends, I don't know, John Malkovich. Like we're crazy Croatian heritage. I think the mayor of New York used to be Croatian, whatever. Like we have so crazy Croatian heritage, but people need to see it. right? I think the openness to go out in the world is just what's missing, right? And that's what the Israelis do better because they have this connection, right? Here it's just too beautiful to leave Dalmatia. That's the problem. It's just too good.
That's why your investors come to you, and
we have more money.
Croatia.
Like, money is coming. It's coming more and more money. People had it never better here. Never. Trust me. There's more money coming and people get, comfortable. They say, what the fuck, I don't need to go to your side. That's the combination. Like, you need to find still the people with hunger, but people with openness to go in the world and sell. Because technology-wise, and that's also what I learned from my co-founder is they're not, they don't have any things which basically make them away on this side. They can focus on creating a product. He had nothing. Like, we're from the Dalmatian, from the inner lands, I'm born in Split, but still from the inner land, we have nothing. We just focus on building the product. That's what I love about him.
Okay, nice.
I'd say it's two things. The mentality that doesn't want to go global. I think it's two things. First is the Yugoslavian heritage a bit. Like it's the mentality of our parents that say, finish college, find a good place to work and work there 40 years.
Yeah.
Like, that's insane.
Well,
like I had parents of my friends that I wanted to bring into Hypify.
Yeah.
Panicking, going full panic mode over it's risky, it's a risky business. I know Stjepan, he's a great guy, but what if it fails? What the fuck? If it fails,
then you can go and work for the city.
Then I can build another company. Like, well, you're not gonna die, nothing's gonna happen.
Yeah.
And I think the second thing in Croatia is the ecosystem is starting to build up, but it's not still as strong as it needs to be. Like UiPath exited in Romania, and it created a bunch of startups. It pushed an ecosystem, and now there's one of the biggest conferences in the region in Romania, in Bucharest. And I think that we as young founders of Croatian startups should show and should talk in places like this to show, like, you can build something out of Croatia. We need to push the ecosystem. We need to get more investments into Croatia. And now, by the way, it's never been a better time to build a startup in Croatia, at least with local VCs, because there's never been more money. It's like a bunch of money lying around. Who's going to pick it up? Maybe you, maybe you, maybe you, maybe me.
And how you create a FOMO. Don't take the money from Croatian VC. I mean,
in the first round, you took it from a Croatian VC. I
took it, because I need to. But you can say no in the beginning, right? Yeah. One learning.
Okay. Someone said the other day that actually this is the peak of opportunity for funding in Croatia. Is that something you agree with?
Yeah, so far,
100%.
So far.
Oh, so it isn't. It's going to keep growing.
It is definitely. When Hypify exits, it's going to be 100 new startups popping up in Croatia.
Nice.
When Hypify IPOs.
European Central Bank and European Union is pushing a lot of money to Croatia, and I think there's a lot of money, a lot of funds. And I just hope that the startups will be bold enough, not like we have been in the beginning, also that we combined with a local VC to be bold enough and say, I don't want to give away 10% of my company for 300K, because that used to be the pattern a few years ago. So that's really bad, right?
Yeah, that's it. And so the VC world now, like you said, you were saying you might get it, you might get it, you might get it. You joked a little bit about whether to take it or not, but what would be your advice when it comes to going to Croatian VCs, approaching them, or even VCs in the region?
Either you can create FOMO with enterprise sales and with a product that's hot in the world, like AI. The growth of AI in the past couple of years has been massive, and suddenly somebody realized you need to protect it. And it's an amazing niche. It's an incredible idea, and I love it. But if you don't have such a good idea in such a growing market, my advice is go and talk to people. Don't be scared to talk to people. If they say no, ask why. If they won't tell you why, be like Antonio, push them 20 times, maybe not 20 times, but then go to the next one, find out what they want, what they need. Sometimes it's FOMO, sometimes it's passion, sometimes it's energy. And again, what I mentioned at the beginning, sell to customers, find out what they want, because that's how you build a good company. That's how you find MVP day one. And when you find it, like when you build, it's like you should lose all shame and all cringe. That does not exist as a founder. You're gonna be embarrassed. You're gonna embarrass yourself and other people so many times that you're gonna become numb to it. And just go and talk. Like, that's why tech founders have issues. They don't want to sell. They don't know how to sell. They're afraid to punch out of their comfort zone. It's like, just make the comfort zone not a thing at all. It's like don't step out of the comfort zone. Make it non-existent. Like do everything. Like it's one life. What's the worst that can happen?
Nice.
Also, one thing I forgot to say is like you need to have advisors, and you need to pick the right advisors who can bring you the FOMO to the VCs. One of our first advisors was actually Monika Mikac. She was COO in Rimac, and one of the most well-known people in Croatia for investment funding. Right now, we don't need her that much as we're now evolved for cybersecurity. But as of time, you need to bring the right people and give them a little stake in the company to advise you and do the FOMO. So, for example, we have Ofer Ben-Nun, who's the legendary, probably the best Israeli founder ever, who sold companies to Palo Alto on our cap table, on our board. You know, so it's important to have the right people who can push you to the investors, who can introduce you. Because hey, look at this great company, right? I mean, they've been doing amazing things. And then it's a combination team, he is right, and revenue, first traction, first logos, right? That's the thing. No one will care if you sell to, I don't know, you mentioned Cedevita. I don't know, right? He will say, who's that? If you mention Infobip in the US, they will don't know, who's that?
Yeah.
You're going to bring the big logos. When we closed Uber, everything exploded, literally. Even KPMG exploded. Like you need to fight for this one deal more than for 10 other deals. That's my vision. And I would encourage people in the business, go in cybersecurity. I mean, there's another Croatian startup, I would say Unicorn, Versing Labs. Not a lot of people know because they have not been crazy public in Croatia. But I would say it's our best unicorn. It's our best unicorn and the only one, the real one. Cybersecurity is insane. It's going to be even more important with all the political stuff and with all the World War III, whatever, and threats and political stuff. I think Croatian people can really build, and tech people can really build amazing cybersecurity products. That's my advice, right? Okay. I'm a bit biased here. I know I'm in marketing, whatever, like doesn't matter. But I would always encourage and always stay in cybersecurity.
Okay, thank you. Well, there we go. Last time we heard about gaming industry. Now we're talking about cybersecurity. If you are worried about your future in the IT world because you may hear crisis around you, we've got some very good advice there. Look at the cybersecurity. Guys, we're going to wrap up there. A huge thanks to Kristian and Stjepan. Let's give them a round of applause, please. Thank you, guys.